All right, so you've been in business a while, you're overwhelmed with work, you've got a steady flow of profit in your bank account, but at the same time, you're having to continually turn away new opportunities because you don't have the margin in your schedule to take them on. If this sounds like you, it might be time to bring on someone to help with your workload. I know a lot of people get hung up on this first step of determining, do I outsource or do I hire? Do I go to a company or a person individually to offer me a service in return? Or do I hire someone and train them and allow them to work directly and only for me? The difference between outsourcing and hiring can be kind of vague, but it can be great to understand the difference between the two and see which is a better fit for you. Both have huge pros and both have a few cons, so it's worth taking the time to consider what your best option is before you move forward. I'm going to walk you through just a couple quick questions that will help you gain some clarity, but first I want to help understand what the difference between these two options is. Let's talk about outsourcing first. This is when you would approach either a company or someone with an established business who has numerous clients and say, I want to come on board as a client of yours and have you help me do some work. For example, outsourcing your editing. There are big box editing companies or individual photo editors who you can reach out to and say, hey, the only job I need help with is editing. Can I send you my images? You'll edit them the way you know how to do and send them back to me. Another option is financial help or bookkeeping, saying, hey, you're an accountant. You know what you're doing here. I want to send you access to my bank account and files, and I want you to manage that and prepare me for taxes. The other option is hiring. This is when you would hire someone specifically. You would interview, train, and do all the prep work to onboard them onto your team and teach them the tasks necessary to teach them the skill sets necessary to do the tasks in your business. This is a more one-on-one relationship. It may be more of a consistent long-term thing, and they may be doing more than just one or two specific tasks. They might be following a broader range. So those are your two options, outsourcing or hiring. Right? So there's variations on all of these different things, but these are kind of the basic outlines we're going to work with for this point. I'm going to walk you through a couple quick questions that will help you determine which is going to be the best fit for you. Okay? The first is, do you already know what type of work you need help with? So this is the best first step for starting any type of team building process, right? You need to know exactly what would be beneficial to get off your plate. So if you've been time logging, look at your time logs. If you have a master to-do list, look at that. Walk through your client process or your project process and see exactly what tasks don't necessarily need to be done by you and determine what that's looking like. Is it really one specific task like editing that's taking up the most of your time? Or is it things like running to the post office, picking things up, doing returns? Maybe it's emailing, maybe it's signing contracts, maybe it's managing things that are in a couple different categories, right? The next question is my personal favorite, and it is, am I already good at this? Or do I already suck at this? This has been a super eye-opening question for me to ask as I hire, because it will really determine, do I have the skill set to train someone, or do I need to hire someone who already has the expertise in this area? I'll give you an example. Meg came onto my team 2 years ago, and at that point I needed help with client management, shipping gifts, responding to emails, managing timelines, things like that. But it was already something that came naturally to me, this client interaction. So it was really easy for me to train her on the way I was already doing things because it was already working. I just needed to mimic myself. I needed a double of me that I could train and teach and send out on her own. On the other end, finances have always been a pain point for me. I'm just not great at bookkeeping. It's not in my skill set. And after years of frustration, I finally said, I'm throwing in the towel and I'm hiring someone who already has this skill set and this knowledge and who can teach me the things that I need to know about this. In this situation, when you outsource, you come on as a client of them. They are in charge of educating you. When you hire, they come on as an employee of you and you are in charge of educating them. The next question is, do you have any hopes or dreams in the future, both now or far away, of building a team? Because if you don't, then outsourcing is going to be the best option for you from the get-go. It can keep you as a one-woman show while you have a little help behind the scenes. But if you could see yourself potentially with a small team, there's no reason to wait. Just start digging into the training process, knowing that the team you start with will grow and evolve and change over time, but you will always glean wisdom and knowledge from the process of hiring and training. So it's always a beneficial time to start. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a couple pros and cons of both outsourcing and hiring, and my hope is just that it will help you understand which is going to be the best fit for you, because there are great benefits to both. Let's talk about outsourcing first. So hiring an outsourcer, using another company, working with an individual or a virtual assistant, the biggest pro to me in this situation is that you're hiring for their knowledge. You are bringing someone on who already knows the area that you're delegating them to. They already might be an expert in that area. For example, bookkeeping. When I hired Morgan, she was already a bookkeeper. She knew how to run the finances, and I didn't have to. I had to know, a basic knowledge, but I could hand it off to her and leave it in trusting hands. Maybe a virtual assistant has already had experience running other people's inboxes, so she just needs to learn your style. Sending your photos to an editing company, they already know how to edit. They know how to use Lightroom. They just have to learn your style. So because of this, there's a very short lag time between the time you bring them on to the time they can sufficiently do work independently of you. So if you're in a crunch for time, this might be a good option. But there are other pros too, so keep listening. So one of the cons of this is that you're paying for their expertise. So usually an outsourcing company or a virtual assistant is going to be a higher hourly rate or higher price per service, and that's usually worth it. If you decide that an outsourcer is the right option, that money's going to be worth it because it's going to be for their expertise and for the benefit of not having to train them. But if you're getting started, sometimes that can be intimidating. It is a higher introductory price. The other benefit of outsourcing is that they can usually work remotely. You can hire someone from across the world. I know my bookkeeper travels full-time, which is amazing, and she can still work with me remotely. She has all of her own equipment. I didn't have to purchase that for her, and we can just send work through the cloud, the cloud, whatever that means. The downside of this is that if you're someone who's bothered by working home alone, you're not going to gain company from this. So you might have to spend a few more days at coffee shops to get out of the house, but that is the only downside of that, as well as they're not going to be in person typically. Another pro of them is that usually with an outsourcer, you can adjust their schedule seasonally or in spurts. You might be able to say to a virtual assistant you're hiring, hey, I'm going to have 5 hours a week for you at the beginning. It might increase to 10, but then when wedding season ends, it's going to be less. They will communicate this clearly in your initial conversations, and they'll indicate if that's a good fit for you. But usually a virtual assistant or an outsourcer who's working with numerous clients is okay with a little bit of a flux in how many hours of work you can provide for them a week. The downside of this is that they most likely don't have the desire to ever eventually come onto your team, either in a larger role or a full-time role. They're running their own company in the same way that you are, and that's great. But that might not mean that you have the option of hiring them for more work later. So choose what tasks you delegate wisely, knowing that that workload might not be able to increase over time. All right, pros of hiring. My company's done a mix of both, but the majority of our team members are hired employees of the company. There are options of subcontractors or actual employees. You can figure all that out. That's a little bit more technical. But for today, I'm just going to cover what are the pros and cons of hiring. This would be finding, interviewing, bringing onto payroll a team member who's local or who, it could be remote as well, but is only working for you, or maybe, has another part-time job, but you are going to train them for every part of their job, which is the first pro, but it's also the first con. All right, so training them means from ground zero, they know the way you do things. You can walk them through every bit of the process, and it's baby step by baby step by baby step. Meg had never held a professional camera when she started working for me. Now she's a second shooter and will go far beyond that. So the only way she knows how to shoot is in my style, because I was able to nurture her through that growth. The downside of that is you're going to have a lot of training time, and this is something you really should not underestimate. If you're looking to hire for wedding season, you should be hiring long before wedding season so that you have adequate amounts of time to train and nurture and take that slowly. Training is not a process to be rushed, and it won't result in comfort for either you or your staff member. So training is both a pro and a con, right? All right, price. Prices for virtual or in-person work or help can be by the hour, it can be by the task. You can more determine it because you are saying, hey, look, this is what I'm willing to pay for this. If you're interested, come. Rather than approaching a company and saying like, hey, what do you charge for this? You know, you are the one who sets the price. You can pay by the hour because you're also going to pay them for that time you spend training them, right? Versus paying a higher amount for someone who's already an expert. So you have maybe a lower entry wage to get someone on your team, which is great. But they might be more dependent on you having regular, consistent work. So if you know, look, I really need 10 hours a week, or I really need 5 hours a week, every week, or I always need Saturday coverage. You can be specific in that hiring process, but if your work ebbs and flows throughout the year, it might be easier to work with a company where you approach them as a client, if that makes sense. So the last pro is that you can have a buddy in your space, in your office. Meg has been such a joy to have with me in my office once a week for the last couple years, and I didn't realize how much I missed having someone in person. And the other pro of this is that they have the potential to grow into larger roles on your team over time. Like I said with Meg, she started as just client relationship and things like that and has grown and grown and grown. So you always have the option. Obviously, it's contingent on the other person's participation and desires as well, but you might have more of an open door to further grow, develop them as a larger part of your team, and continue to nurture and increase that relationship, that knowledge base, that skill set to potentially a larger role later on. So I know this was a lot to take in. I've created a PDF that walks you through all of these questions, the pros and cons, and will help you better determine which is a great fit for you. But I hope this gives you some clarity